Started this live stream.
All right, you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 6th Planning Commission meeting. My name is Warren Rothie. I'm the Assistant City Manager here and the Secretary of Planning Commission. As a housekeeping note, City Hall HVAC is under construction. So we do not have working heat in this building. We did have some space heaters in here earlier. It seems like they did their job quite well. So please, at your liberty, adjust the windows as need be. Might get a little toasty in here. Without further ado, I'm going to proceed into the roll call. Paletta? Present. Hodges?
Present.
Evans?
Present.
Zeros?
Present.
Pataki?
Present.
All right. Have a quorum. Also, at this point, we need to select an interim chairperson. We have a motion to have somebody serve as interim chair. I know Member Pataki has offered his time this evening to serve as interim chair of this meeting, and the intention is to appoint a chair and vice chair at the December Planning Commission meeting, which will occur on December 7th.
Move that Commissioner Pataki be interim chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank
Take it
you.
away, Mr. Chairman.
I almost said I was opposed, but I restrained myself. So thank you all. I think we can now move to the fourth item on the agenda, which is approval of our August 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. The Planning Commission should have received in each of their packets a copy of the minutes. So I think I will move to approve those minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about the minutes? All right. Hearing none, should we just go ahead and vote? Do a voice vote? All right. Everyone in favor of approving the August 8th, 22 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Hearing none, the approval for the meeting minutes are approved. Okay, item 5 on the agenda is unfinished business. Anyone have any any comments on unfinished business?
Just to briefly mention, Chairman Pataki, so the community knows, we tried to keep tonight's meeting agenda austere, so we could spend the time that is necessary to make sure we properly deliberate this item. But I look forward to December when we'll have a master plan update. We'll talk about the real estate subcommittee that was formed, because that's an important issue, the vacant land inventory and other discussion items that are really crucial for this body to be on top of. So again, just reminding everybody that those are important items of unfinished business, and we'll get back to them in December.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think one comment I'll make, and I don't know if this is out of order or not, but I do want to say that there are 3 members who were here last week or last month. We're not here, and I just want Commissioner Chesterton, St. Pierre, and Chairperson Lindsay, and I just want to say, I appreciated their contributions to this Planning Commission. I know it can be sort of a thankless job, so I just thought I'd say something to thank them. Any other unfinished business? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to our new business. So as you can see, the main thing on our agenda today is to conduct a public hearing on the rezoning request concerning 1212 Weyburn, 1214 Weyburn, 1213 Maryland, and 1217 Maryland. So I think the proper thing to do is to start with a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that motion? I don't think there is any, so should we go ahead and vote? We can do another voice vote. Anyone in favor of opening the public hearing on this rezoning request, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I think the way we're planning to have this flow is to start with presentations by 2 people who are here. I think which one?
Applicant first.
Applicant first. Okay, so I will invite the applicant to come up here and speak about this proposal.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. My name is Mike Steins. With me is Bill Thomas. We represent the Cotton family who own ultimately the properties that you mentioned a short time ago, 1212 and 1214 Weyburn, as well as 1213 and 1217 Maryland Street. Bill is an architect by trade. I am an attorney. Just by way of quick background, I grew up in Grosse Pointe Park, moved here in 1983. I'm not going to tell you my age. Went to Trombley, went to Pierce, went to South, off to Michigan State, went to Florida, moved back. People ask me often, what the heck did you do that for? And I tell them it's because Grosse Pointe's such a great place. It's the best community that I've ever lived in. So sorry if that's too much, but just want to let you know that. Tonight, we're here asking for a rezoning of the area that those four houses where they were, from residential to a P1 vehicular parking district. The P1 district is an approved use, and it's already in the zoning code. By petition to this body, you have the discretion to change that where there is a need for additional parking. That's an issue, right? That is debated heavily and most recently. We believe that additional parking is needed off-street. The business district in the Kirchville area is flourishing. There have been new businesses. It is the place to be in Grosse Pointe for family activities, all of the great sort of festivals and weekend activities that occur are awesome. People travel here to frequent the restaurants, and it's just a very family-friendly place and with great entertainment. We have plans to continue developing. We have done several developments already. Recently, just a few came online. The Needle Point, which is a tattoo parlor above the old Flowers by Gabrielle. Above the bar is back in the former space by Flowers by Gabrielle. And there's a retail clothing store coming down the street, as well as new restaurants that way. And so there is a need for additional off-street parking. When you have a business district that is growing and flourishing like this one is, it's sort of goes without saying that parking is. And we believe that this change to the zoning will alleviate some of the parking congestion that is occurring in some of the residential neighborhoods. We believe that the new developments that are, well, the developments that I've just mentioned that are existing and the new ones on the way are going to draw people in. And so there is congestion in the residential districts. We need parking in order to place cars. We don't want additional cars clogging up the residential streets, parking in front of people's homes. And the parking study that's often talked about mentions this. It supports what we are doing. When there is a growth in retail and other types of uses in the business district, it's suggesting that in the future, additional off-street parking will be needed. And so that's what we are trying to do as part of a larger picture in our development efforts moving forward. We need parking for patrons, right? And employees especially. I think employees are often sort of overlooked for whatever reason in the conversations that have been had in the community lately. I am aware anecdotally of stories of business owners in this district where employees are parking up to 4 blocks away. People are having trouble hiring as it is, and the first question they have is, where do I park? And the hands go up and say, wherever you can find a spot. If we're to grow this district, which I think is the intent of many, and I think the great majority of folks in this community would agree that the things that are happening down there are good, we just need off-street parking. The master plan also talks about the future need for expansion of parking once these business districts grow. Back to the parking study, I just want to make a quick mention that, although it was assumed that this was sort of the current state during COVID-19, I don't think that's all that relevant. What's more relevant to me is that it assumed that certain private lots along the Kirchhoff Business District corridor would remain parking lots. And that's not the case. We do have future plans, as I've mentioned, to develop, for instance, the lot next door to the Zellish route and also the lot next door to the bakery. It's, for lack of a better word, a cardinal sin that those lots are not being used at the highest and best use. We would love to bring more businesses in, and that is the goal. Our intent is make the district as good as it can be, as welcoming as it can be. That's always at the forefront. And we think we've contributed in a way that, that is helping that cause. Those are some of the sort of general or overall points that I wanted to touch on and why the parking is needed in our opinion. I want to talk a little bit about this project as it relates to the 4 lots on Maryland and Weyburn. This is not an asphalt lot with yellow lines. We have worked with the city and others in order to incorporate items and emphases found in the parking study and the master plan that promote green elements. So that's what we've tried to do. This parking lot, if suggested for approval to the council, will incorporate permeable pavers. It will have 2 EV stations, a solar-powered pay station. These are the types of things that we're looking at and working with the city. The city's demanding it, right? Doing conversations. This is what the master plan is telling us what we need to do. What are you guys doing about it? And I think we're going above and beyond. At least that's what we're trying to do. I'll turn it over to Bill for a second to talk about some of the greenery that's going to be or proposed to be placed, around that lot. We have trees, we have shrubs, we have, various types of, I don't know if you want to expound, but, the greenery that will make it hopefully look more like a park.
And one of the goals of the project was actually have a tree canopy over the parking lot, not just a barren asphalt parking lot with yellow lines on it. It's got sugar maples and oak trees that are going to eventually, in 20 years, cover a good bit of the parking lot with canopy, which has been a goal from the Cotton family from day one. This not to have a eyesore or a heat sink in the city. Shade it, do it properly. That's what we intend to do.
Yeah, and so again, this is to support what we sort of the larger picture, what we see is the continued future development of that business district. Like I said, there's no question, it's the envy of the points as it relates to entertainment and walkability and such. And walkability is a point that I'd like to touch on. There have been discussions in the community recently that this distracts from or impedes upon the walkability of the district. I disagree. You need parking to bring people into the district to do the walking. I come down here and I see more and more people walking all the time. And you need additional parking in order to make it more walkable, right? It will draw people in, sort of like the trolleys do. It is a walkable district. We want to keep it that way and make it even more walkable. So I think that, the statements that are made that, these 4 lots, if they were turned into parking lots, make the city not walkable is really not true. And the inverse is really the truth about it. Draw more people in, allow them a place to park and let them walk. And that's how we view it. There's also been discussion around affordable housing and removal of units from the housing stock. As it relates to the Cotton family, we have done a lot more than adding, improving to affordable housing than taking away from affordable housing. We founded the Grosse Pointe Housing Foundation 10 years ago. This was a program, a not-for-profit, whereby we offer grants to subsidize rent for students, teachers, law enforcement officials, and other sort of professionals and tradespeople. It's been extremely successful. There's been 759 college and graduate students which have gone through that program with a grade point average of 3.5 or above. And we've infused $2.1 million into those grants during that time frame, all for the purpose of making it more affordable for those types of folks who are getting their college education and pursuing careers, so with the hope that they fall in love with the place and stay here. So to the extent that you hear any comments tonight about the, where we're against affordable housing or we're moving these units, we've done, I think, more than anybody, at least to my knowledge, to promote affordability within the city of Grosse Pointe Park. So with that, again, I think that I'd like to conclude by saying that it's always our intent to make the area the best that it can be. We believe that the improvements seen over the last 5 or 10 years are positive, and the great majority of folks and residents and community members agree. I hear comments all the time of praise and appreciation. And so we really do think that overall we're trying to make it better. We do work with the city, and they hold us to the green plans and such. And that's our intent moving forward. So in conclusion, I am asking for the zoning change for these 4 particular lots, from residential to P1 parking. Again, it is already approved use in the code, and you can, if you find the need, use your discretion to approve or a recommendation to the council for such approval. I don't know if you have any questions about the renderings or the maps. Happy to take any questions from you, and I appreciate your time this evening.
Great, thank you. I have a feeling that commissioners do have questions, but I think what I'd like to do is we have another presentation, and then we will also want to listen to public comments as well. So if you don't mind sticking around, and then we'll come back to you and ask whatever questions we need during our rezoning request discussion.
Absolutely, but happy to.
All right. So our next presentation, I believe, is John Jackson.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you. So, yeah, my name's John Jackson. With McKenna, we're the planning consultants for the city of Grosse Pointe Park. We're also very fortunate enough to be the planning consultants for the city of Grosse Pointe Farms, and Grosse Pointe Woods. So we've had experience working in the Grosse Pointes. We understand what a unique environment this is and what a high quality premier community this is. Side note, I was born and raised in Grosse Pointe as well, so I've got that on my side too. But the main thing I want to mention is we're here as the planning consultants for the city of Grosse Pointe Park. So we're here to sort of give you an analysis of the applicant's request for rezoning as it relates to your master plan, your zoning ordinance, your other policy documents, and anything that we feel you should consider when you deliberate this applicant's request. I'm going to put up a quick graphic over here if you don't mind. Let's start with this one. So this is the, just to orient everyone, this is the existing zoning in the city. You can see the site is located up in this area right here between Weyburn and Maryland, sorry, yep. And so it's these 4 lots right here, and this is zoned RD, which is 2-family residential, which allows a range of uses. It allows single family, it allows duplexes, it allows townhouses under certain conditions. So there's a range of uses that could be developed in that RD residential area. Immediately to the south here is the B1 district. the business district, the local business district, which allows for every commercial use that the city allows, because the city only has one commercial district. So any use, commercial use could go in this area right here. The applicant is requesting, as he mentioned, to change these 4 properties to P1 parking, which has very limited range of uses, primarily surface parking. So I just wanted to sort of point out what uses were involved in these 3 zoning districts: the business district, the residential district, and the parking district. Okay, real quick. I wanted to show this just as sort of a quick refresher on the city's recently adopted master plan. It shows this area here, which is the Kirchhoff Business District, plan and zone for commercial development, preferably mixed-use development of a 2 to 3 story nature. 2 to 3 story nature development along Kirchhoff. A mix of residential for mixed use, residential or other service uses, commercial uses on the first floor with maybe residential above or maybe even other kind of complementary uses on the second and third floor. And this is another diagram in the city's master plan on Kirchhoff Avenue showing areas for preservation, enhancement, and investment. And you can see in this diagram that there's a lot of areas for infill development along Kirchhoff Avenue. I think that was one of the policies of the master plan, was to encourage development in the Kirchhoff Avenue area, to promote a walkable area along Kirchhoff Avenue so that you don't have parking lots interspersed and interrupting the flow of commercial activity and walking on Kirchhoff Avenue. So the idea was to concentrate the redevelopment on the sites that face Kirchhoff. So that was one of the policies, right, is to focus the development on the sites that face Kirchhoff. So try to make the most, not expand this area into the residential neighborhoods. Focus the redevelopment on Kirchhoff Avenue. One of the other policies of the master plan was to protect and preserve the residential neighborhoods of the community. It's what makes the community tick, right? And so all these areas in the orange here are the residential areas that that the city is committed to preserving and protecting. So what happens when you get the redevelopment that you want to see in here, 2 to 3 story nature, and you, without parking along the lots along Kirchhoff, and then you protect these residential areas? Well, the parking has to go someplace, right? You have to have parking someplace. And the city's done a great job in terms of its master plan and the recent parking study that said we should exhaust every other option to make the most and to avoid unnecessary surface parking. So better wayfinding, point people in the direction of the existing municipal parking lots. Utilize alternative forms of transportation where possible, so people aren't dependent on driving their cars to the area. But at the end of the day, the parking study and the master plan both say eventually there's going to be a need for surface parking if you want to realize your vision for the redevelopment of the area on Kirchhoff Avenue. So parking has to go someplace, okay? So the idea of having a single purpose district, parking district, for areas that are located between the 2 and 3 story commercial uses with their services, their garbage collection, their drop off and deliveries, and the adjacent residential neighborhood is a common approach to logical and orderly development. In fact, I brought yet another diagram right here that sort of gives you an indication of where some of the existing parking lots that are available in this area. And you can see, it's hard to see, they're shaded in blue are the existing ones. And you can see they sort of form a buffer along the south side of Churchill between the commercial areas and the residential areas. And you can start to see that pattern starting to develop here in this area, as well as the block is proposed between Maryland and Weyburn. So it's a lot to unpack in terms of your recently adopted master plan and your parking study. But that's all included in our analysis here in terms of the master plan. It seems to support the applicant's request to rezone that property to a single purpose district that would serve as sort of a transition between the commercial area and the adjacent residential area. And also the city's policies in the master plan regarding protecting residential areas and promoting the development of commercial areas. So in our analysis of the master plan, we feel that the requested rezoning is consistent with those policies. We looked at a number of other criteria in order to be thorough on this review. We looked at the compatibility of the potential uses allowed in the parking district. I sort of hit on that it's a single purpose district that is simply surface parking. Also has other standards as well in terms of screening and buffering, and those will be reviewed on the site plan if this rezoning goes through. Compatibility with adjacent uses, again, I talked about how it serves as a transition. Capacity of available utilities and public service to serve this use. I should have pointed out, and I didn't point this out, but this is going to be a joint venture with the city, who's going to collect the revenue from the parking meters and any permits associated with this in order to help maintain the lot over the years. So there is a public-private arrangement here, which again is consistent, I think, with what other municipalities are doing in order to reduce the burden of infrastructure investment, but also achieving the necessary results. There's a demand. Your parking study said that there's a demand for parking, but there's also a requirement that the supply of parking be appropriately managed. But eventually there will be demand as development continues. One of the other criteria is whether or not the proposed rezoning would create an isolated island of zoning or a spot zone. And again, this goes back to the sort of the logical and orderly zoning of this. You can see they're not asking to rezone properties that are, mid-block in the residential area. This is a unique physical location that's immediately adjacent to the business district that you're trying to encourage development in the adjacent residential area. So there's a unique physical aspect of it that makes it a very logical and orderly place to put a single purpose district like this. So that's sort of basically the our review of the standards for the rezoning request. Again, we've looked at it according to the master plan, the parking study, the city's other zoning policies. And based on that analysis, our recommendation is to recommend approval of the rezoning request to the city council.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. I think I'll say the same thing. I told Mr. Steins we may have questions for you later. But I think the next stage of this hearing, we would like to hear public comments. Our policy at all of our city meetings is public comments are limited to 3 minutes. And as you can see, I think we are literally standing room only. So before we start, can I just to get a gauge, can you raise your hand if you intend to come up and speak? Okay, very good. So again, reinforcing that we would like to get through the comments in less than 3 minutes each. Why don't we start from the front? So please raise your hands again. And okay, I'll start from the left front and then go back. I think that's the most orderly way. So
I guess stand or do I go up there?
It'd be better if you came up here so we can hear you. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes.
We do have a timer for
Okay.
preference. Perfect. I won't start talking.
And I'm supposed to say my name and where I live, right?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
My name is Beltisa. I live at 1221 Maryland. My fiance and I currently own the home on Maryland Street, immediately north and adjacent of the proposed parking lot. It's hard for me to express how sad that vision when we purchased our home, our first home, of starting a family in a safe and peaceful environment is suddenly extinguished. By tearing down the houses to our right, our view has completely changed, and now we have a total lack of privacy in our own home. When I look out our dining room windows, I see a future parking lot, an existing parking lot, and a view of Kirchhoff. The homes torn down used to be a buffer for us. In the evening, all the shades must remain down to prevent everyone from peering into our life. Our future view of cars, parking lights, and headlights loom large as a future violation of our space. We will also be victim to a considerable increase in traffic and other noises of the business district that were previously muffled by the houses that were torn down. The constant noise of cars coming and going, car alarms, etc. Additionally, our quality of life will be greatly diminished by the smells we will endure based on the proposed location of the dumpster for a seafood restaurant that will be adjacent to our backyard and our garden. I am sincerely asking you, how would you feel if all of a sudden a restaurant's dumpster was mere feet away from your backyard and your city officials did nothing to stop it? Our summer evenings will be ordained with the smells of rotting fish and other food waste. We are very concerned about the nuisance that pests will pose to us as well. Raccoons and rats will raid the dumpster that is planned to be right behind our terrace garden we just installed like a month ago. I walked down Kirchhoff today and counted 10 plus rat traps behind the businesses on the business district. So you're subjecting myself and my family to that. I won't even feel comfortable walking in my own backyard or trying to pick from my vegetable garden. Enjoying a bonfire or cooking out in my backyard will be a thing of the past. If that becomes the case, I would consider our yard unusable. It's my understanding that the board is to consider impacts of a rezoning has on the community. I can only hope that you consider this impact that's having on us. Between the parking lot and adjoining adjoining residential properties, there should be at least a lot's worth of landscape buffer. As a homeowner that is directly impacted by this proposed parking lot, I'm distraught, and not only do I encourage you to hear our grievances and support us in not approving this plan, but I honestly beg you to look at it from our point of view and imagine if you were put in this position. I get that GPP wants more parking, but please review this zoning as if it was your life, your home, and your future. Please imagine how diminished your quality of life will be if all of a sudden you see standing from your home is cars, lights, a small barrier that does nothing to block any of these cars, and a dumpster. To highlight how close we are, I've provided pictures so you can see what we do, if that's okay. And that's it.
We all say.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and speak up because I know we're facing the wrong way for everybody else here. So my name is Devin Stahecki, and I reside at 1221 Maryland Street with my fiance, Belle, who you just heard speak moments before. In considering the impacts on our quality of life, which Belle mentioned, I want you to also consider the impacts that this proposed change has on the property value of our home and the dangerous precedent you're setting for all other homeowners who reside in the Cabbage Patch if this were to be approved. It's not a stretch to say that any homeowner who lives within several lots distance of a commercial district should now feel very uncomfortable of how exposed their city code and city officials have left them to the whims of developers. We have heard time and again from the business owners and certain members of city council that parking is badly needed. This despite the fact that recent parking studies conducted pointed to the opposite, and that many spaces along the Kirchhoff Avenue, which are visible to anyone who lives nearby and regularly travels the business district during the evenings, as we do, given our proximity. We've been reminded by many of the same people that these parking lots serve a public good, which, if true, means they must also stand to account for the devastating impacts they will have on us and other members of the community. I'd like to call attention to the section C of the rezoning standards that you see on pages 8 and 9 in your agenda before you. the site plan, as it speaks regarding the influence on property values. So in the response from McKenna, there is omission conveniently responding to the impact that this development and this rezoning would have on property values. With insufficient screening, noise and light pollutions, and the dumpsters that my fiance mentioned, they'll create awful odors and attract rodents. It's quite clear that the developers felt this was a topic better left untouched. We were unsurprised and nonetheless dismayed to find through our discussions with real estate professionals that our home has likely lost a substantial amount of its value due to the raising of our neighbors' homes and the proposed parking lot development. This is more than just a short-term financial impact, but one that has repercussions which we felt for decades. Does the city of Grosse Pointe Park honestly believe that this rezoning justifies the hardship imposed on us and my fellow homeowners who abut these new developments? I shudder to think of the pain that other homeowners will incur in the next phases of this development that were mentioned, as this entire sad song and dance continues and repeats itself. And I am urging the Planning Commission and any members of City Council that are present to vote against this rezoning, as there are clearly more questions than answers and more parties that are left injured than those that stand to benefit. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Walter Staggy. I own a property on Nottingham Road. I am Devin's father. I have a degree in landscape architecture. So as a matter of course of my professional business, I prepare site plans to be presented to boards like yourself for approval. And so I'm quite familiar with processes and how this normally goes. I've spoken to Warren at length, at some length, not great length, but what I could, and about the process here and how it's well behind the times in terms of what normally takes place in approval. The site plan that they presented wouldn't even get on the docket, any place where I practice. There's no specifications. There's no drainage calculations. There's some trees demonstrated, but it doesn't say the size of them, the variety of them. He may say that they're sugar maples, which, by the way, don't do well in reflective light, but they will get here. So we don't know anything. This plan, rather than mitigating the impact on particularly Devon and the other house that's adjacent to the parking lot, as well as the streets, which are going to also be impacted by the increase in traffic, this plan does nothing to mitigate. A street tree, when the picture that Bill showed you shows a 6-foot post, which is when they're staying in their dining room looking out, is about this high. That a 6-foot fence, rather. That's the post demonstrates the height of a 6-foot wall. It does nothing to mitigate the street trees that you're going to look over. There's no indication of screening, adequate screening, and in fact, rather than mitigate, it exacerbates the impact on the neighbor, because that dumpster is their dumpster, which is their fishy dumpster, is going to be not behind their business where it should be because it's their fish. It's put right by the backyard of my son, which they, and as Bell said, they will not be able to go out to their yard and enjoy eating because it's going to stink. We did walk along these alleys. Every restaurant had at least 2 rat bait stations. So don't tell me there's not rats prevalent in Grosse Pointe Park. So, and rats, that's where they eat. The dumpster is where they eat. Where they live is in the soft ground adjacent to where they eat, which is going to be in the garden that they just lovingly installed. And in their yard is going to be the home for these rats. I don't want my grandchildren, nor would you want your grandchildren, living with rats in the backyard. I don't want my children to live in rats in the backyard. Their property is being worthless as this. And I think that they need to buy the additional lots so that they can adequately screen.
Go ahead.
Hi, well, that was a tough act to follow. I don't have all of that. I don't know all about that. All I can say is that I'm a resident of a long time. I was here when there were liquor stores and vacant buildings down the end of Weyburn. I lived in the Maryland building across from, my name's Nicole Delano and I live on Weyburn Street, 1343. And I also own a business, so I understand the parking and I understand the residency. I understand that I want my kids to live in a nice backyard. But I also understand that I'm running a business and I need to, in order for me to pay taxes, in order for me to do things, I need to make a parking lot for my customers. Do I want them to live with rats in their backyard? No. Is there another way we can do it? I hope so. But I love this city. I've lived here 30 years and I'm excited about the growth. I don't want anybody to be hurt by it, but I'm really excited about it. I think I want to go shopping. I want it to be walkable. I want it to be the place to be. I like Grosse Pointe Park, but I like it better now. And I'm not going to take 3 minutes. I just wanted to say thanks and just do right by the people. I think that's all I want.
Thank you. Is there someone next in that row going to our left? Or, yes.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Logson and I'm a homeowner on the 1200 block of Maryland. On the issue of the proposed rezoning and parking lot, I would ask the committee, what's the value added for the city in this proposal? Parking lots don't pay taxes. The tax revenue alone of a half a dozen families versus a stagnant lot should make this an easy decision for you. Especially when your own commission parking study was clear that a measure this drastic was not yet needed in the principal business district. The city, as far as I can tell, has taken no visible action on the short-term targeted recommendations in the study, which I believe you should implement prior to tearing down our community's housing. And that's why I actually came here tonight, because I want to remind you all that as members of this committee, you're here to serve the best interests of the city and its people. It is critical to bring families into this city if you want to build a thriving community. My family moved to the park 4 years ago, and we are incredibly grateful that we had the opportunity to buy an affordable home in a great neighborhood, just 3 blocks from both elementary and middle schools for our children, which is what brought us to the city in the first place. These 4 lots are also just 3 blocks from our great schools, and I want that opportunity for other young families who want to lay down their roots here. With the loss of that housing, we're potentially losing half a dozen families who could live here and send their kids to our schools and grow up as members of our great community. Maryland and Weyburn are both full of young families who bring vibrancy and vitality to our city. How does a parking lot begin to match that kind of value? All a parking lot is, after all, empty space, no matter how high quality it is. So I ask you, when you consider this rezoning, to remember what makes our community great. It's not the parking lots, it's the people.
Okay, so we'll have the one right in front. Would you like to come up? Yes. And then we'll go back to the.
Good evening, I'm Karen Stock. I live at 1073 Lake Point. I'd like to speak to the lack of need for parking lots. I would argue that the need is parking availability. And the parking study completed in 2021 offered many approaches to achieve that, including one that would bring needed revenue to parking management. In fact, the study said parking in Grosse Pointe Park was between 75 and 90%. That's from page 14 of the study. And I'm going to quote, "This is a good benchmark and where you should strive to be. A primary goal is to have sufficient parking. However, optimal parking efficiency also means that you do not want to overpark." The study said in more than one place that short-term recommendations should be implemented before determining if additional parking spaces are needed. In fact, your own December 3, 2021 parking study review reported this from the study, quoting, "Sample data collection should be completed to show a need for more parking here, but after other short-term recommendations are implemented, including adding meters to public lots, adjusting meter rates and duration, and improving public wayfinding." I took a walk down Kirchville earlier this evening, and to my eye, at least some of those short-term recommendations have not been implemented. You have a good opportunity tonight to avoid moving forward with something that has not been recommended by your parking study, has been advanced in a process that is opaque and is unpopular with constituents in the neighborhood. Your website calls Grosse Pointe Park the place to raise a family. To me, this action seems contrary to that slogan in every possible way. I urge you to reject the request for demolition. Thanks.
Brent Draper, 1400 Nottingham. I think it's great to see some of the development. Really excited about all these businesses. It's hard though. It's hard to get too excited when when you think about the fact that, Bell and Devin woke up one morning to excavators in their backyard, not even a knock on their door. That's where, this whole process is disgusting. The way that we talk about it, the way that we're here arguing at a zoning meeting about dumpsters that are going to be put next to somebody's backyard and a 6-foot wall that's obviously not tall enough to block their houses. If you guys live in Grosse Pointe, you know that most of our houses in a cabbage patch, the ground floor is several feet up. It's not 1.5 feet. My house, I'm 1400 block of Nottingham, it's about 5 feet before you get to the ground floor. So I just don't see at all how Devin and Bell are going to be made whole or any of these other neighbors. I think that there's just a lot that needs to be done and a lot more thought that needs to get put into this. And as the parking study did say, there may be a future need. What the parking study doesn't talk about, because we don't need it now, are things like types of parking, structures. Why is it all flat lots? Why do we have to tear out more and more of our housing instead of exploring instead of exploring structures? I understand that they're expensive, but it's a way that maintains density. It's a way that maintains the master plan idea of 2 to 3 floor mixed use developments. I understand that progress has happened, but I think that we really need to think about conditions to this zoning approval, because right now it just doesn't make sense for our city.
You can go to the row back and then we can move left to right as you're facing us.
Hi, my name's Christina Cicchini. I live at 1222 Weyburn. So I'm going to start off by saying that I did not receive notice of tonight's meeting. I own the second home from the demolition site, and after talking to several neighbors, I did not, mostly renters also did not receive notice. After demolition was completed without any notice to neighbors and without posted signage of upcoming demo or permits to demo, I noticed that half of 1218's driveway was missing, causing the renters that live there to park in the street. The developer didn't give them any regards to getting to their driveway or accessing their garage. Further showing that they are only trying to put their parking lot for their own purposes. They did not care about the people living here. There's plenty of parking and you can find a spot within a block of your destination, but you must be willing to walk. The parking lot will create a severe rodent problem, especially with dumpsters from an oyster bar. Who will take care of that rodent problem? Is it the city who will take care of it? As far as maintenance of the lot, who will be in charge of that? The city? The lot adjacent to that is a disaster. If that cannot be kept up as is, what makes you think that this lot will be any different? The alley between Weyburn and Maryland does not support the type of traffic it will receive. The infrastructure is not there. There have been 2 major accidents at the roundabout over the summer, just yards away from this proposed parking lot. And then adding additional foot traffic to this area and any extra vehicle traffic will certainly cause more accidents, and that cannot be safe for the community as a whole, not to mention the extra strain that the local police force will receive. Parking lots cause the additional car thefts and additional vandalism to vehicles, which we already see plenty of in this area. I urge you guys to vote correctly and vote no on this. This is just going to knock all of our property values down and we won't be able to sell our homes after this.
Good evening, my name is Mary Rula, I live on Lake Point in the Patch. I was at the last planning commission meeting, and I think I was the only one in the audience, so. It's really great to hear all of my neighbors, Belle, Bevan, and others who are directly impacted here, making incredibly eloquent arguments. So I'd like to say just a couple of things. Because most of you all are fairly new on the planning commission. But understand that while they have the most immediate impacts, and it's totally unacceptable, we stand here in solidarity with them. There are other neighbors who are carefully watching this. A couple of years ago now, the city was sniffing in the direction of knocking down a duplex where I used to live on 1400 block at Lake Point. A senior couple on a fixed income lived there. I'm like, oh, heck no. There was no real need. So I organized my neighbors, we all signed letters, and we managed to push back the city at that point. So it's not just about the people at this end of the town. There are other people watching this. McKenna stood up here and said it's permissible. In my reading of what they did, they're not wrong. There's a difference between permissible and what should happen, right? Policy. Ultimately, I would argue it's up to the city council to decide as a matter of policy if this is the right thing to do. But I would respectfully submit your job here tonight is to go through what the parking study said, the conditions that Karen talked about, and tell us on the record how that's happened and not happened before you step forward. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Tim Kohler, 1000 block of Berkshire. I wasn't planning to speak this evening, but when hearing my fellow neighbors start us off, you couldn't help but be motivated to get up here and speak. So I came straight from soccer practice, so if I had not, I would have dressed up. But I was able to participate in soccer and coach the youth team in a green space, all right? That's very important for vibrant communities. But one thing I wanted to note is that this planning commission and the three commissioners that the current interim commissioner mentioned, they did a phenomenal job leading you all with the master plan and got great input from many of our residents. That was a great process. I think tonight, I appreciate Mr. Stein's coming out this evening. This is the first time that we have heard from the developer or the representation in a public forum what their plans are. What we also heard this evening was confirmation that the current parking lots that currently align Birchball are going to be reorganized, and there's going to be new developments in that area. I think it's the first time we heard confirmation on that. This planning commission, with a great precedent set in front of it for engaging the community, I ask for you tonight is to think about how you continue that relationship. You have a private-public relationship that's going to be used to manage the parking lots. But as you go forward in consideration for what the developer is planning, this is not going to be the first time in front of you all. When you leave tonight, whether it's a yes or no, I urge you on behalf of the community to ask the developer loud and clear in your official communication that they do more besides come to these commission meetings for the first time presenting their plans. They should be having open dialogue continuously with the neighbors impacted and the community at large. Lastly, now to understand that Mr. Stein represents the Cotton family, Mayor Hodges. John Cotton is the president of the board that is responsible for your hiring and also negotiation of your contracts. I urge you to strongly consider this evening if your vote should be cast. Thank you.
All right, so moving on, if anyone in the next row.
My name is Naomi Gold. I own a house at 1220 Maryland. I have my master's in urban planning, so I'm very familiar with this process. One of the unfortunate things of master plans is often they get put on a shelf, especially in small communities like this, because there are members of the community who have more power. And unfortunately, that seems to be what is happening in the city of Grosse Pointe Park. When we look at a plan, McKenna came up with a great plan, and now they're already going against it. I urge you to question that and think about not yes or no now, but is this the time? Is this something that needed to happen overnight? And is it something that needs to be decided on tomorrow? We are seeing right now that the public parking is not being used at the capacity that we already have. So why are we going to tear down more houses and put flat lots there? I appreciate the presentation that you gave and the information you shared, but frankly, a lot of small communities like this, Grosse Pointe special, right? My great-grandparents lived on Harvard. And every single one of the generations since then have lived in Grosse Pointe Park. And I'm still here raising my family. I don't live in the house in Maryland anymore. My plans are to retire in it. So I'm not speaking just for myself, but I'm speaking for people who want to be here for a long time and have other family members who live here. When you talk about small businesses, I love what you mentioned about the bar. If you start to actually study small businesses, you realize those people don't drive from 10, 20, 30 miles away. They come from a mile radius. They walk. A lot of the small businesses that are maybe in the neighborhood don't require people to park there. And if you look at the amazing large events we do, like the quarterly gatherings, you're saying they're growing and there's no parking. So if they're growing and people can walk to them, why do we need to provide more parking? It's a misuse of the land at this time. Maybe in the future, and this is why we revisit, right? We do the 5-year revisit. See what's happening, see if it's needed, see if it's appropriate, and take note then. But to do this right after, we've come up with a master plan that's very well thought out with a lot of input from the community, walkability being one of the main things. What we need to do here is think about in these planning meetings, how to get people to stay local at what they're doing. So people aren't going to the city of Detroit to eat all their meals. So they're not shopping online for all the things that they buy people. How do we get people to the businesses that are there? The solution is not parking. So I ask that you consider to just put a pause. It doesn't need to happen now. Maybe it needs to happen later, but it's a slippery slope. We start rezoning parcel by parcel, and that's not how we plan this.
My name's Arthur Mullen, and I live at 1331 Wayburn Street, and I'm another urban planner. I also serve on the TIFA board, but I'm here as just a resident speaking tonight. I want to thank everyone for some very cogent thoughts about planning and the importance of neighborhood and thinking about what creates a successful community for us. One of those things is that we have this commercial strip, and the residential is right there with it. It is not separated by giant parking lots, which we tend to have in the village. And I think that that's one of the things that people really appreciate about the Cabbage Patch and our commercial strips is you walk right out of the neighborhood, right into our downtown. We expect local government to be transparent, and I think that this is not a transparent situation. We're talking about rezoning for things that are coming that you all haven't even approved of or looked at. I drove through the downtown district on the way here, and there was plenty of parking on a Thursday night at prime time. There is street parking, there were spaces available unpurchasable. So I believe that some of those situations are incorrectly characterized. Another thing about the parking study is that it had a list of 6 things that needed to be done, as been mentioned before, and we haven't done any of them. And now we're going to start knocking down buildings. We have a school system desperate for students. All right, well, we just knocked out 8 families potential living here with this development. We don't know if that's going to be parking lots and if there is going to be more residential coming. We also have loss of the character of the district. I live on Wayburn, walk by, I now am seeing a bunch of parking lots. So those are some of the concerns. My one other concern is the setbacks. Why are the setbacks adjacent to the properties 2 or 3 feet wide? Good planning principles are at least a 6 or 8 foot setback as wide as possible. One final thing, we have a master plan that was just prepared. There is no reason that it is no longer current and reasonable. So we should be looking at the future land use map to make a determination about what's coming forward. That's the policy document that should be guiding both this body and city council. So I think that is where we want to take a look, and I disagree with McKenna and their assumptions about the changes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tom Steen. I've lived in Grosse Pointe Park for about 55 years. I've sold real estate in Grosse Pointe for about 40 years. Last several years, Grosse Pointe Park has risen almost from the ashes. From being the unwanted stepchild of the 5 Points, it's now the hip, vibrant place to live and visit. What has turned the community around? Years of hard work and investment from the city and residents who took risk in the park. Gone are the seedy party stores that did not appeal to residents. Gone are so many empty storefronts that scream that we are failing. Gone is a greasy spoon with major structural issues. Gone is a struggling church that could not sustain itself and invest in its needed upkeep. Today, the park is a destination point for residents of all the points, as well as outside of the points. We have the park grill that's expanded into a second storefront. We have Antwater Brewery, there's indoor and outdoor seating. We have the 313 Wine Bar and the Cabbage Patch Cafe. We have Bricks that provides a family atmosphere. Shamey's has recently changed ownership and has reopened after a long closure. Colors and Growlers is popular. Coming soon, replacing Janet's Lunch is a brand new 2-story art entertainment location that will draw even more visitors. Antonio's Restaurant and Rustic Bar are about the only 2 survivors on Kercheval when the park was abandoned by most merchants. There's been many additional commercial improvements and new establishments on Charlevoix and Mac, along with bars and restaurants that did survive there over the years. The impact of all this development has not only raised the residential values in the park, but it has had an even larger impact of increasing the values of the Cabbage Patch. No longer is the park stigmatized, but is now desired, especially to the younger residents that we previously would lose to the Royal Oaks and Ferndales on the other side of town. Along with 2 outstanding waterfront parks, 2 movie theaters, street festivals, and more, we are the envy of the points. We strongly support creating parking to fill the needs of our vibrant commercial areas, which will also alleviate parking issues for homeowners and renters. Decisions have to be made. These decisions have to be made with a large lens and for the benefit of the park as a whole. There's no decision or answer that will please everyone. The park has been on the right path over recent years and continues to improve. Parking is needed both for businesses and for the residents. Providing off-street parking adjacent to our commercial district, while not well received by all, is good for all. Also signed on this letter was Kay Agnew, Kathy Champion, Peter Dow, Mike Fickney, and Eric Goosen, all with different real estate firms. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ron Porter. I live in Pemberton. And I have a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, because I live in a place where, I live across the street from a newly elected city council member. I know there'll never be a parking lot built next door to my house. Excuse me?
I said, lucky you. I live at 1156 Weyburn, so I'm right across the street from the parking lots, but I'm saying good for you. I wish we had those privileges.
If you let me finish, I would appreciate it.
You can take up 30 seconds of my time.
What I would like to say is that I think the planning commission needs to do its job, which is plan. And you don't know what the plan is. All you know is that these folks have come here and they've already torn down the houses, I believe, if not all of them, most of them. And they're asking you to make that okay by rezoning it in parking. Now, I don't live in the patch. I can't comment on what parking is like for residents there. I can tell you that I did live in the patch at 1096 Beaconsfield in 1978, and parking was hard then as a resident. So I believe these folks very truly when they say that parking is very, very difficult for residents in the patch. And you owe them some solution to that problem. What I can also tell you is that I've lived in Grosse Pointe Park since 1984, and not once have I ever had a problem finding a parking space when I wanted to go to one of the merchants on Kercheval, which I did for years. I went to the Cleaners, I went to Sparky Herbert's, I went to all the businesses in the park. And I'd also like to challenge what this gentleman just said about the park being this awful, terrible, deserted dump in the 80s. It was not. It was not. And I will also cite Sherry Cotton, who happens to agree with me on that, because she came here and testified at the ethics hearing that she moved here in 1988, and Grosse Pointe was beautiful and wonderful, and they fell in love with it, and it was fabulous. So what do you need to do to be at the planning commission? You need to know what the plan is. Mr. Steins is very eloquent, and I looked him up. He's the general counsel for Meridian Health. That's what he is. So is there some plan here that Meridian Health has? Why is he here? He's here as general counsel of Meridian Health. So what's their plan? Is it Meridian Health that needs parking? And one more thing, Ms. Hodges, you need to recuse yourself. As I've been telling you since before you were elected, you have a conflict of interest in your role as president of Belle Isle Conservancy. The Cottons, the developers, are one of your major donors. They can hire and fire you. You need to recuse.
Thank you, Mr. So working into the last row, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in the corner?
Hi there, Liz Leshkevich, 1268 Beaconsfield. When I walked in this evening, Mr. Stein stated that it goes without saying that when we grow business, we must grow parking. And I would challenge that assumption. Just because the Cotton family has more money than I do does not mean that their word should be accepted without question. The Cotton's commitment is not represented in dollar signs. It is demonstrated with diligence, and as is yours. With regard to that diligence, earlier comments mentioned that the master plan should exhaust all possible options before adding more parking. We have absolutely not exhausted all possible options. Thriving cities around the country and around the globe can show us best practices here. If the Cotton family is concerned about residential parking, they should be advocates of residential parking permits. They should be advocates of pedestrian zones, which have been shown to increase pedestrian traffic to storefronts. On the note of adding value to the park, I want to remind everyone here tonight that the value of the park is represented in the Cabbage Patch. The homes leveled were beautiful, affordable, historic homes. We bought in the park because of that density and history. I ask you to remember to do your diligence and reject this proposal. I didn't buy in Grosse Pointe parking lot. I bought a home in beautiful green Grosse Pointe Park, and I had faith that this city was a city moving forward, not turning to the past. Thank you.
I'm Brian Vosper, I'm in 1100 block, Maryland. Other folks are saying, and I'll say too, I'm also a certified urban planner. I live directly across the street from one of the houses that the city tore down earlier this year. That's been a muddy lot since then. Had several young adult neighbors who are married couples that this community says they want to attract to move and buy houses here to this community. And they've moved and instead bought houses in Hazel Park, Ferndale, and other places in Metro Detroit because they do not like what they see happening in this community and on their block. You have the report from the planning consultant from McKenna tonight. It says you can rezone. The applicant also admits you can rezone. You can. You do not have to. And the zoning code also says you do not have to. You, the Planning Commission, spent an entire year asking this community of 11,000 residents what we wanted to see as the future of our city. Over 1,000 residents participated in that master planning process, and that was making parking expanded was not one of the priorities that was a part of that master plan. And that was reinforced with the maps that were included in the master plan, which do not show any expansion of parking lots. This is the master plan that you overwhelmingly approved, and it's the master plan that council also overwhelmingly approved. In addition to a master plan, the city also completed a parking study of the entire city. And this parking study recommended, as others have said, 6 steps to be completed before any new parking is to be expanded and buildings are to be demolished. As far as we are aware as a community, not a single one of those steps has been started, let alone completed. We have a planning consultant tonight, John Jackson, planner that I know and respect, said that the day to expand and demolish parking would come someday. Someday, that is not today. So you, the planning commission, have a choice to make. You can be about supporting the priorities that this community, your neighbors, and you spent an entire year thinking about, listening to, and then voting on and approving yourself and this council, current council approved. And you can be about acting on based on facts and data about parking and future plans for this city, plans that this city and your commission valued so much that you paid for it and spent an entire year doing with us, the residents. Or you can choose to vote for the opposite. And by doing so, you'll make it clear to this community whose voice you actually listen to and value. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Wilder and I'm a resident in the Cabbage Patch. In 1997, my spouse and I, we were a young couple then, decided to uproot our 6 and 4-year-old and start a new life in Southeast Michigan. We looked in Detroit and we looked in Royal Oak, we looked in Ferndale, Hazel Park, but the area that was the best fit was Grosse Pointe Park. We were able to find an affordable flat on Nottingham, just half a block from Trombley School. We lived in that flat for 10 years while we saved our pennies till we could afford to buy our first home in the 1300 block of Beaconsfield. At the time, the Kirchhoff district had a barber, a veterinarian, a coffee shop. They had Wi-Fi and video rentals too. A children's bookstore, a hardware store, a health food store, a grocery store, pet supplies, everything to service the neighborhood. We felt like we lived in a small town just minutes from downtown Detroit. The city planner's report references the several decades the 4 parcels have been used as residential dwellings. Well, these aren't just parcels. These were homes. These were thousands of family dinners in the evening and hundreds of mornings of parents watching their children at walk to Defer and Pierce. These were our neighbors. Now we see development plans to make Grosse Pointe Park a destination, a Royal Oak Junior, a place to visit for a couple of hours to see a show and have drinks. And that's all fine. But are we really going to trade families for a few cars for a few hours a week? I love my neighbors. They look out for me, and I try to look out for them. Our future residents need housing. Our city needs residential tax revenue. Our schools need students. Our community needs people who are invested in the community, not more places for people to park their car for 2 hours and leave. Save our community, save these parcels. Do not recommend approval of the rezoning application. And I would just add one thing. I walk my dog between 6 and 7 p.m. on Saturday evenings through the Kirchhoff Business District. There are dozens of parking spaces on Kirchhoff in the municipal lots at Red Crown. There's plenty of room to park. Thank you.
Yep, you'd be next.
Hello, I too wish I had written down a bunch of eloquent statements at this point, hearing so many of my neighbors speak. And I just want to say my name is Kelly Rossi. I live on 11. I live at 11 on the 1100 block of Wayland. So I wanted to come in here and just give what I know, like start with what I know. And what I know is not much. As a resident that woke up one morning and suddenly homes were fenced off and asbestos abatement was being done, it really made me want to think, like, what is a common citizen, like somebody who's lived here since 2008,
what are we allowed to know? Like, what is our right to know as a neighbor of what is about to happen? Now, the homes, I've tried really hard to be like, what's the me? Like, what do I have to do? What's the action that I have to do to pay more attention, to be more civically minded at this point? And I'm hearing you, I loved hearing that you wanted parking for employees. I loved hearing that you want to attract people here. Now, I was attracted by a lot of things to come here and then stay here. The farmer's market, I did go to the liquor store, okay, I'm gonna confess it here. I got to go with my tomatoes, not like all the time, but still, I did, go. And I went to Mueller's and the health food market store was there. So I was just like, yeah, this has a lot of the things that I wanted because I went to college in Detroit, so I was like, walkability. I walked to get my hair done at Fish. Like, that's what I considered it to be. Like, I'll walk 3 miles anywhere, that's fine. I enjoyed whatever. But like, I'm looking at this happening and I'm just truly wondering, like, what would it have taken for somebody to just say, hey, this is about to happen? Instead of me waking up one morning and going, wait, where did that neighbor go? Oh, that dog that he walked all the time isn't gonna be here anymore. Wait, what happened? And then piecing it together from things. Like, I didn't get a chance to see the plan for very long, but like, I wonder, like, you want it to be walkable. You want it to be a place for families. I walk all the time. And not all of these places that are being built were always safe. So I have to selfishly think of my family and my walkability in this moment and wonder, what families are we thinking of? Can it be all of us and everybody that's impacted by this? I'm asking you, I really was at the beginning of this. Can you just pause this and do a little bit more research, talk to a few more people, do some of the things that were maybe recommended? But now coming in here and hearing and not knowing what is literally going to happen to houses, I don't know. I call the city every week just to say like, hey, do you know yet? Or, is there a demolition about to happen? And seeing what is going on with our neighbors and hearing it, I have to say, please vote no, please. Bye.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Blushkevich. I live at 1268 Beaconsfield. My spouse Liz spoke a little while ago. I might offer a unique perspective in that I am not from Michigan. I moved here in 2019. When my wife and I moved here, we had to learn about what it's like to live in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan. We encountered 2 shocks that I want to share with you, 2 shocks. The first shock, as a student of history, the first thing I did was to learn about the history of Detroit, the city right next door to us. It's an automotive city. That's its first history, Motor City. It is also a black city. Those 2 histories collided very often. What happened to Black Bottom? What happened to Paradise Valley? I don't need to tell the people in this room. Those were 2 moments when city planners chose automobiles over human beings. 2 vibrant neighborhoods, centers of culture, demolished for the sake of the automobile. Second shock, moving to a diverse, democratic city. We learned that the local newspaper is owned by a single family. Fine. That same family owns most of the commercial real estate. Fine. That commercial real estate promotes candidates that are also promoted in the local newspaper. Fine. So it doesn't really add up that that same family with very strong business ties to the people who spoke earlier have public interest in mind. So I want to yield my time by saying that the public is before you speaking tonight, and I urge you all to listen to them. Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Muskakis, and I own and reside with my two elementary age children on the 1100 block of Weyburn. My mother owns and lives in a house on the 1300 block of Maryland, the house which I grew up in and maintained for her. My ex-wife lives on the 1200 block of Maryland, just a few houses away from her. And if you're wondering how well that situation works out for me, let's just say I buy Tylenol in bulk. I was born in Greece, and my parents and I immigrated directly to Grosse Pointe Park. We could have lived in Waterford near my mom's sister, but my parents chose Grosse Pointe Park for its schools and its reputation as a family-centered community. For the most part, I've been a lifelong resident of Grosse Pointe Park. I attended Defer, Pierce, Grosse Pointe South. I could have lived almost anywhere, but I live here not only because of the easy commute to downtown where I work, but for the same reasons my parents first chose to come to Grosse Pointe Park. I've also been growth in popularity of the Kirchville Business District, as I'm sure people on both sides of the parking debate are as well. Over the last few years, I've had to question whether Grosse Pointe Park still maintains the reputation I knew it to have while growing up here. That is a loaded question, but what I can confidently say is that replacing residential homes with parking lots is a direct attack on the image of this community and an unnecessary action as there is already an abundance of parking. This past Saturday was beautiful, with pleasantly high temperatures for this time of year especially. So I went out for my almost daily jog down Kirchville. And as funny as it may sound, I was thinking and hoping that I'd have to dodge cars and pedestrians. Unfortunately, the business district was rather quiet. I'd venture to say that it was quite dead, actually. I saw close to a dozen open parking spots on Kirchville during a prime time, not only the week, but of the evening. I truly don't care what a parking study says, whether it's for either side of this debate, because what I've learned in life is that you can adjust numbers and variables to paint any narrative you want. Just look around, parking is not needed. Don't put the cart before the horse. Let's first get some businesses here that people outside of this area are excited to come to. I'm sorry, but let's talk about the pink elephant in the room. The businesses on Kirchville are not bringing scores of people here. Let's have people drive around the block for more than 5 minutes first before we start having this discussion again. In the end, it doesn't matter that parking lots are bad for the environment, that they're ugly, attract a crime, or that they're not even needed. What matters is that you have dozens of people here behind me that vehemently oppose this. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alan Ackles. I'm a lawyer in Birmingham, here to represent I spent my childhood coming down the lake shore and visiting my Greek friend's second cousin, Basil Moises, until I was 15 years old. I didn't live here when I was a child. And I still have bitterness about it. But what's really here tonight is what we're here for. I can make it open and say, thank you for putting me in a suit for the first 4th time in 2 years since COVID started. Funerals. I'm not sure I want to joke so much. And I reverse Bold Town. I represent lots of owners of condemnations. And that was my highlight of my life was 20 years ago when I got Cold Town. We saw private entities to acquire private property from others for their own benefit. One thing I want to say, because I think you might limit it in 2 minutes, it's concert. Not bad people at all. No Mr. Cotton through politics. Sometimes I disagree with them. But I also know that he had the courage to face the disaster when he left almost 20 years ago. He's not a dishonest man in any way. I think the Cottons are like a lot of other people who've been extremely successful and they want to think they're giving back to their hometown. And they're sometimes think so quick, they're a little arrogant. Knocking down these 2 houses without anybody knowing about it, realistically, the neighbors who I represent right behind us didn't know about this, is out of sight. So I could talk a whole night about whether it's fait accompli that we're gonna have parking there. And my sense is, in the end, you're gonna probably put parking in a lot of areas. The biggest problem I have with it personally is, and I have, talking about, I was a city of Royal Oak attorney. The only condemnations that ever represented property owners with the city of Royal Oak. We cleaned up
blighted south end of the community after they put the Express 696 in. And we bought the 5 blocks north. I was the lawyer for all those cases. And one where we have a development on 75 and 14 Mile Road, which is just another commercial strip center about to be emptied out of all its boxes. And I'm now the city attorney in Trenton, Michigan. We don't do any condemnation. And I'm on the board of zoning appeals, which is in Bloomfield where I live. And what really amazed me, we came to this issue on the board, and on the day out, being a lawyer, they looked to me about how I'm concerned. People were asking for variances, and I hate variances. I hate giving up anything. But the people that were with houses were 2,000 feet under 1 acre minimum. And they had pools before, and they wanted new pools. And I said, what are we, someone was opposing. I said, why? They treated up. They were spending a fortune training. Thank you, Mr. Okay, I'd like to just ask you to stay this, table this through the time. Let the people discuss this. So, thank you.
All right, so we covered all the public comments. Anyone else like to speak? All right, so at this point, we did get some, I would like to get to the written comments. We did get some written comments, and some of them were quite long and would be well past the 3-minute limit if we were to simply read them off. So I've asked Warren to summarize them.
Yes.
So can you go ahead?
Yes, we have 7 written comments that were submitted. I will summarize them as follows, and all of them yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll speak up. All of them are as part of the record of this hearing. So the first comment I received was from Tyler Cliffman. He submitted a written comment describing inconsistencies between the proposed rezoning and the community's vision as articulated in the recently adopted master plan. Tyler lists citations from both the master plan and the MKSK parking study to develop his argument. The second comment was from Devin and Bell, residents of the adjoining property, and they expressed concerns over the city's demolition and zoning review processes and encouraged the city to evaluate them to prevent things like this from happening in the future. They also expressed concern over the impact the proposed rezoning would have on both their property and their neighborhood as a whole. The third written comment received was from Joe Habecca, writing on behalf of the Grosse Pointe Park Business Association. He submitted a letter on their behalf, which describes the presence of parking issues and need for parking to accommodate the recent growth in the commercial district, and expressed support over an increase in parking for the business district. The next letter that was received was from Tom Steen, Kay Agnew, Kathy Champion, Peter Dow, Mike Bicany, and Eric Goosen. They submitted a letter which describes how the community of Grosse Pointe Park has improved over the last several years and attributes much of the success to the commercial and business developments over the years. The authors advocate support for creating parking that fill the needs of the city's vibrant commercial areas. We also had a comment submitted by Wendy Relland, asking for the commission to carefully review the rezoning request. Concerns were raised about the impact of a parking lot on the neighborhood and school district, the interaction between the rezoning application and the master plan process, and the impact of additional surface parking lots on the city storm sewers. Questions and concerns regarding the process and communication surrounding the demolition was also mentioned. We have Max Viner, writing in his capacity of the chair of the infrastructure committee, submitted a letter commenting on the impact of the proposed parking lot and the city's sewer system. And the last written public comment that was received was from Victoria Cosgrove, who submitted a comment expressing concerns over the development process, governmental oversight, and property transactions related to the development.
Okay, that being the end of the written comments, and we've gone through our public comments here in person, I'd like to make a motion to end the public hearing portion of this agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so shall we go ahead and vote on the motion to end the public hearing? Everyone in favor of ending the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, hearing none, I will close the public hearing portion. And now the next portion of the agenda is the consideration of the actual rezoning request. So I think in order to kick off that discussion, I need a motion to approve or deny rezoning request. So do I hear, is anyone willing to put forward a motion? All right.
I'll move forward with a motion to approve.
Okay, just to be clear, our motion is to approve, to send a recommendation to the city council that they approve the rezoning request.
Correct. The motion from Commissioner Saros is to recommend that we approve the rezoning request to council. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hodges. Okay, now we can open up discussion of the motion. And I think what we've done in the past with this commission is to make sure everyone has their say, is we just go one by one in turn. And then, so I think I'll start with Commissioner Evans. And this, I think, will be the opportunity if you'd like to ask questions directly of the members or just speak straight up about your commentary about the motion. Go ahead.
So I don't have questions as much as I have some commentary on how I feel about this process. And I think that this, to me, is an issue of procedural integrity. And I struggle with this process being not as transparent as it should have been. I struggle with the impact that it has on the residents not knowing what was coming. I have a concern that this sets a precedent that will turn into potentially a slippery slope on how we conduct these types of projects and motions, or not motions, but the things that are going on to make this process activated. And that concerns me. I don't know the consequence of tabling at this point in time. I don't know. I came in here with one idea of how I felt about this situation. It was definitely an issue of transparency and again, procedural integrity. I feel more deeply that this is something that was rushed. And so that's where I sit right now. That's how I feel about this. I don't have as many questions as I just feel that way. I do feel I have no issue with the developers. It's favorable. I believe that there's environmental concerns in the parking lot. Knowing that how these things work, that's going above and beyond the budgetary expenditure that would be expected to do that. And I think there's value in that. I'm not against the progress of the business community and developing. I'm not against that either. I just don't feel comfortable with the way that this process was rolled out. That's right. That's my.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Saros.
I want to thank everyone for coming out here tonight. I know many of you in the room. It was really good to get a multitude of perspectives on this. This is a difficult decision to make here. And of course, my first planning commission, great night to learn the ropes here. So I voiced some of these concerns as well. I think that there needs to be a discussion on the process and the procedure here. I think that all needs to be cleaned up. We should not have neighbors that aren't aware that a home right next door is getting knocked down. And maybe there was notice given, maybe there wasn't. I'm not sure the exact details. So I'm being told no. So I believe that is definitely something that city needs to bring attention to. That all needs to be cleaned up. Now, I'm a real estate broker by trade. So I spend my time selling and renting property within the greater Grosse Pointe. So bringing another perspective here to my thoughts and my feeling to this topic here. And it was voiced tonight, and actually a lot of the public comment. We need to bring more traffic to the Kirchville Business District and to Charlevoix. Many of these businesses struggle. They have 1 to 2 days a week to make money. I know many of these business owners, and one of the number one things is a lack of parking. And one of the number one things that keeps new businesses from opening up in this district is a lack of parking. I see it on a daily basis. We've leased out a number of different properties there within the districts that are in discussion. And I have prospects that want to be in these locations, but
they don't have the parking and they choose other locations. And so this is something that I've just seen this need for years. If this district is going to continue to develop, and not only some of the things that were mentioned tonight that are in the pipeline, the need is going to be here very quick. So tabling it, I can understand the thought for tabling it, but this need is going to be here very soon. It's already here, speaking to the business owners and even a lot of the residents as well that live near that are not as many of them are here tonight. But I've spoken to many residents that are in the area because I want to have more community engagement going into this meeting. I haven't had anyone tell me that they didn't feel that more parking was more traffic would need to be brought to the district. So those are the
Thanks everybody for coming. I think I'm the second most senior person on the commission now, which isn't saying a lot. I started in January of 21, and I know that it was during the pandemic, but this is many times more people than have ever come to one of our public hearings. And so it's great to see community engagement. I'm grateful to the presenters for offering the proposal and for certainly, Mr. Jackson, your thoughts about what's contained in the application and how it might impact our city. I'm really troubled by the fact that none of these neighbors seemed to know that the homes next to them were being torn down. And I don't know whether it was required, Mr. Steins, you probably know this better than I do. I don't know whether it was required for you to give notice. If it's not, you didn't do anything against ordinance or anything like that, but it kind of gets you off on the wrong foot being a good neighbor. And I don't know how these people are supposed to know or have any assurance that you're going to be a good neighbor going forward. Those are my personal thoughts about that. In terms of the site plan, as far as parking lots go, it looks like a nice parking lot. I do have questions about it. If you don't mind, Mr. Steins, I'd like to ask you some questions. Now you mentioned that your intention that the lot is unpurchasable between Flowers by Gabrielle and the Zealous Route is to eventually be developed into a commercial building. Is that right?
Oh, that's correct.
Okay. And it sounds like the same thing for the parking lot next to the bakery?
At some point, yes.
Okay. Do you know how many parking spaces are contained in those two lots?
There's 18 lot spaces in the Zealous Route lot, and there are 12 spaces in the bakery lot.
Okay. And so by my count, at least according to the site plan, I think I counted 31 spaces in the new lot. Is that right?
Oh, that is correct.
Okay. So it's based, we're okay. In terms of how the parking is going to be allocated in the proposed lot, is there going to be any availability for permit parking for residents?
Yes, we've had preliminary discussions with the city on permitting. It's our intention to allow or arrange for some sort of a permitting process. The details of that have not been worked out, but we do intend to have reasonably priced, if that's the right term, permit parking for not only the businesses, but for the residents as well.
Okay, and I know that you just said that it's got to all be worked out, but are any preliminary thoughts about allocation in terms of percentage of the spaces available or anything like that, or is that not something you can answer?
Not something specifically that I can answer, other than on off sort of hours. We know that there's a residential need based on some of the activity recently at the bakery parking lot. Most notably, we needed additional spaces there for new employees at the bakery. And the city had at some point decided to enforce overnight parking there. And there was some feedback that caused some problems for some residents. We want to alleviate that through a permitting process, the details of which I don't know yet, but overnight parking for residents on off hours, things of that nature, off weekends, that kind of thing.
Okay. Now, the current lot between Maryland and Weyburn, it's a public-private partnership and that you maintain the lot and the city gets all the proceeds from parking, is that right?
They get the city gets all the proceeds from the parking, and I believe we do partial maintenance, meaning, I believe we take care of the snow plow.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's right.
And the greenery as well, so we're taking care of all the landscaping. It's a pretty large, extensive landscape package I'm putting into this. So making sure that's not put on the city's shoulders to maintain that we're taking care of that portion as well.
Okay, and what about like repaving and things like that?
Are you talking about, I just want to be clear, are we talking about what we refer to as the lot between Zellshrud and?
Yeah, starting with that.
Yeah, so that's what I think we were addressing. No, there are no repave that currently, if that's what you're asking.
If it had to be, would you pay for it or would the city be responsible for it? Or is that not something?
So that would be us.
Okay. And you expect that kind of an arrangement to continue on the proposed lot, is that right?
The details are still being worked out, but all parking revenue would go to the city.
Okay.
We would maintain landscape. Details around snowplow and street sweeping have not been worked out yet. But the bottom line is that the city would retain the revenue. We and then somehow share the responsibility of the maintenance of that.
Looking at the site plan, it looks like just the southern parking spaces are pervious pavers, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The drainage plan right now is just the water from that side, away from residences.
So in terms of area of pervious pavers as compared to impervious surfaces, do you have any idea what the percentage is of the pervious pavers?
It's about a 1/3 to 2/3 ratio.
Do you know how does that differ, if it differs between this parking lot and, for example, the homes that were present on the lot before, in terms of percentage of impervious to pervious surfaces?
I don't have that information.
Now, I'm curious about the dumpsters too. Do they have to go there or can they go somewhere else? I mean, I noticed it in the site plan, and then when we were hearing the public comment, like it really started to stick out to me. Do they have to go there?
The biggest challenge is the DT.
Okay.
So those wires and Bill can speak back to this tonight.
We can't be located directly below because they're basically the overhead type dumpsters that are done by a garbage truck. The reason why it's there and not on the permeable paver side is that it takes away from the drainage calculation.
Okay.
There are, anything's possible. That's something that we can look into.
Okay. In terms of access into the lot, I'll sort of segue into that. The alley is where the dumpsters are most closely located. So presumably, would the plan be for garbage trucks to access the dumpsters through the alley or through the entrances off the streets?
Through off the street.
Okay. Is the alley going to be accessible to motorists who want to park in the parking lot?
It's accessible for the residences to exit through there. I
Okay.
don't necessarily see motorists coming into town going through that small alley.
Okay.
Exit and enter that.
But there's not going to be any kind of
No.
that's going to be open. All right. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. But I have questions and then some commentary. Mr. Quetta did ask a lot of my questions, right? But just to clarify on sort of the cash flows afterwards. So it'll be a metered lot and the meter revenue will be turned over to Tifa City.
I think that's undetermined, one of the two.
Okay, so it'll go to.
Whoever maintains those meters, I believe it's a city function.
Okay.
So they might know better than I.
And you'll do the partial maintenance. What about the build of the parking lot? Are you gonna cover that?
Yeah.
And then just for the sake of the record, these 4 houses, they were bought from individuals. Were they ever owned by the city?
No.
Okay. So one of the things that came up had to do with the loss of tax revenue from the demolition of these houses. I had the same question. I did talk to the assistant city manager. I think the number that you told me was $5,800 a year of tax revenue from those four parcels. I think it was $5,400 a year.
Yes, so the number I gave you is I took the taxable value, the 2022 taxable value. Two of the properties had sold ahead of time that the value increased, uncapped, and two of them were still the previous year value. You take the total of those four properties, the taxable value, and only apply the city's millage rate, not the county, the school district, just the city's millage rate. The city is receiving, it's just about $5,400 a year in tax revenue from those four properties. Again, two of them had not uncapped.
Got it. So at this particular point in time, the city is losing $5,400 a year potentially tax revenue.
I would say that's inaccurate because part of that assessment is applied to the land itself, which isn't going anywhere. Yes, the structures will be different, but there will still be some taxes received on the property.
And then there will be the meter revenue from the park.
Yes.
Okay. The restaurant that I believe the seafood restaurant that it's the same developer, correct?
It is, yes.
When is that scheduled to open?
Sometime in December.
That's correct.
Timeframe.
Okay. Is it contingent on the construction of this parking lot?
The opening of the restaurant.
Yes.
It's not related to the restaurant.
Okay. In terms of the communication, I mean, a couple commissioners and residents have spoke already. Would you like to comment on what communication was done to the surrounding area?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we could have done a better job. Absolutely could have. I don't want to stand up here and make excuses. We did attempt to reach out on several occasions, probably too late. Actually, I know too late. It was at a time when we were prepping those houses for demolition for asbestos abatement. We will do better. We can do better, and our intent moving forward, if this is approved and other projects are approved, is to absolutely get better at communicating. This one wasn't great, and I have nothing else to say on that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yes, in terms of commentary, so I think clearly we have a conflict between the business owners in the area and some portion of the residents in that area. And, in my view, when we have kind of two factions kind of pulling in opposite directions, a valuable thing that piece of data in my mind is, well, what does the rest of the community think about it? So the subject of the master plan came up many times. When I look at, the survey, the first survey that MKSK did, it was roughly 1,100 people, vast majority of them residents. When they were asked specifically what to do about the Kirchhoff Business District, the number one response was do something about the parking situation. So that's shown on, I believe, page 16 of the master plan. That's on the website. It's also shown on page 20. MKSK also did a second survey after they did a draft. And that was the one where they went through and they took the action items off the draft. And they asked people, the residents, what priority do you assign to these? So that document is also on the website. And I think if you look through that survey for the action item that is, I believe, most relevant to this particular rezoning request, there's an item that's, and I'll read it, invest in public infrastructure in the business districts to catalyze redevelopment opportunities, including upgrading streetscapes and parking improvements. So the response to that from the community was high priority 42%, medium priority 38%, low priority 15%. I'm rounding. Don't agree with the recommendation at all is 5%. So in round numbers, it's about 79% thought it was at least a medium priority parking improvement. So we have two separate surveys in my mind that show that the stuff that the developer is doing, as in taking vacant properties, redeveloping them, adding and improving parking in order to make those properties more likely to succeed. I view that as being in alignment with the data that we got as part of the whole master planning process. So I think that's sort of my commentary with respect to how it fits with the master plan. And then, so having said that, I will now pass it on to Commissioner Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman
Mayor
Matagi.
Hodges,
Sorry, yes.
I have one more question. Do you mind if I
Not
just
a
jump
bit.
in before you take over? I wanted to ask, there is a public parking lot south of Kercheval on Lake Point behind Atwater in the Park. Is that a Cotton property or no?
It is, yes.
Okay, and because there's been, I mean, for at least the last several years, there has been chain link fencing up around an area that doesn't appear to be developed at all. Are there plans to develop that and make that look a little bit better as well?
That's the whole, that is part of, what we're discussing here tonight, but yes.
I understand that, but if you did that, there might be some assurance that you're actually gonna do what you're saying you're gonna do on this one too.
Right. No,
So that's why I asked the question.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm sorry, Mayor Hodges.
No, not a bit. Thank you, Mr. Coletta. And thank you to everybody for being here tonight. My biggest concern, of course, is making sure we minimize the impacts on our residents. And I'd really like to thank Belle and Devin for their thoughtful input to this process, as well as everybody here. We're so much better when we're working together as a community, and we need this, I call it healthy tension, right? Where we stay within guideposts and we really hear from one another as to what will work and what will not. So thank you for being that voice and helping us to get hopefully in a responsible spot on the decision-making continuum. But I would, John, I know in your review somewhere in here, I believe you said, you need adequate screening, and that should be used as a basis for approval. Do you have recommendations on how we could really mitigate those impacts on, and I think this is similar to what you were saying, Pat, but mitigate those impacts on those most immediate neighbors, or Mike or Bob too, if you have any thoughts as well? But I think we would all feel better if we had some assurance that we've maximized that. I hear what you're saying about the dumpster, but gosh, if there's something we can do.
Pay us, give them money. It's affecting us all. They live next to it, I live across the street from us. Give us money.
Excuse me.
Take care of us.
We had the public comment portion of this.
I understand, and you said those houses were vacant. They weren't vacant.
I did not say they were
They emptied them.
Right.
You said those houses are vacant. They weren't vacant.
There's a whole vacant lot across the street from them that they could have built a parking lot. It's been sitting there for years.
Excuse me, the public comment.
You finally talked, so we should hear you. Thank you.
The public comment of this meeting is over. Okay, thank you. Ms. Hodges.
Thank you.
So the question, some additional screening to buffer from the, yeah, there's space on that site plan to provide some additional landscaping that can grow taller than the proposed wall that they have there. So that might be one thing to explore. Some evergreen screening or something like that would probably help soften that for sure.
Well, and part of that answer probably needs to come from our legal counsel as well, which, by the way, thank you to Kristen. I'm sorry, I don't know your last name off the top of my head, but sitting here and helping guiding us tonight, what are our options? I don't believe we can do a conditional approval, right? I mean, what would how would we provide for some sort of additional screening and have the assurance that it will happen?
So we're talking about two different things here. We've got a rezoning request that's pending before the planning commission tonight. The question of the site plan is not before this body. The site plan, per the city's ordinances, and it is an administrative review that will come later. The applicant submitted this, as you will typically see in a rezoning application, to give the commission and the city officials an idea of what's coming. But this is not subject to approval by this body. It will be reviewed at a later point if the rezoning is approved.
So there's an opportunity to explore moving the dumpster and additional screening as well.
Yeah, though the nitty gritty, I know there was comments from a member of the audience about, drainage wasn't shown and all this kind of stuff. This is not the site plan approval process, that comes later. So there's opportunity when the applicant is ready to proceed with developing the site, they will submit a formal site plan with all the requirements of the city's ordinances. It will be reviewed per the process. There will be negotiations, I'm sure, over what the final parking lot will look like.
So then the next question goes to the assistant manager to secure some assurance.
Maybe some input from you on what your sense is, and to keep this from being just words as well, can we ask that you meet with the developer as well as the residents and perhaps Mr. Jackson as direction to you from a staffing standpoint to move this forward? Or is that, I'd like your thoughts on that.
Sure. So, again, thank you for explaining. Tonight is a consideration. It's the first step of a two-part process for every rezoning request per Michigan law. Starts with this public hearing before a planning commission. That recommendation is forwarded on to the legislative body, which in this case is the city council. City council then will take action on that application. The next stage in the development process, there is what we've described as a site plan review. Now, in the City of Grosse Pointe Parks ordinance, site plan review process for a parking lot in particular is the authority to approve and review that site plan is given to the Director of Public Service, I believe is the term, which is the city manager. I know a lot of people out here have urban planning degrees, and typically you'll see that site plan come back to the planning commission for review. That is not what our ordinance enables us to do as of today. So it does, again, create this tension of we are bound to follow the laws as currently written right now in this process. What engagement and what an external review, what a review to determine compliance with, a future site plan. It's an excellent question. It's how do we have the law that guides us, and we have to require it to go in that way. But again, it's how do we engage with those most affected in the community? And I'm willing to entertain ideas how to do that. I don't have any solutions to propose right at this moment, but I did want to at least let the people here in the community as a whole know of the site plan approval for a parking lot goes through the zoning ordinance and it is reviewed administratively. It is not reviewed by the planning commission.
So what I'm hearing from this body is it's our will to want to incorporate conditions. Unfortunately, however, we don't have the legal ability to do that. So that is certainly something we need to put on the list of things that need to get accomplished. So in place of that, I'm realizing I don't need to ask you to do it or anybody else. I can be a facilitator, right? There's nothing stopping me from convening the parties to help facilitate solutions that we all feel good about. And I think we all want that. That's what I know from you all. That's what I know from the people sitting in this room, that I just believe that and think that we can get there. And I have that confidence. So I personally will commit to helping to facilitate those solutions. So thank you for that. My only other question really is on the soft side, and I know you're not the Cotton family, but you know them well. And my question is, why do you love Grosse Pointe Park? What inspires you? What was your first project and what did Grosse Pointe Park look like then? And what is it now? And what do you want to see come? I think, I know I need to hear that, and I would like the community to hear that too.
Pretty obvious.
There is a process to appeal this decision.
Gosh, I didn't know I said anything that offensive on it, but
Yeah.
I would love to hear the answer.
Look, this is where the Cotton family set roots.
when they moved from Houston, Texas, long time ago. And they fell in love with it, right? They fell in love with amenities. And there was a period of time when they saw a decline in certain aspects of Grosse Pointe Park, including the business district, and including some of what was going on in the residential areas during the real estate downturn. And they wanted to act because this is their home, and that's what they attempted to do. And ever since then, we've been, attempting to do really high quality projects that benefit everybody. Our intent has always been good and pure. Right? We are trying to make the district as good and as best that it can be for its residents, for the surrounding points, and for everybody who seeks to travel. And that's it. What the first project we did, I don't remember. I think it was potentially Red Crown, which at the time was a vacant station. We loved the building. We had an opportunity to do something with it, and that's what we tried to do. And I think it's been a success. And
That was a vacant building in the historic, correct?
Correct.
We're in danger of losing that.
Correct.
So thank you for saving that. And thank you for remembering everything I asked in that long question. I'm impressed. Okay, I'm sorry everybody left because it's unfortunate they didn't hear the rest of the discussion, but I did want to address the conflict of interest as well. Ethics are first and foremost in my mind. And, Warren, you hear me say it all the time, right thing all the time, right? That's just our mantra and how we operate. And the first thing I did when I joined council was work towards an ethics review board. So, and when this issue arose, the first thing I did was go to our city attorney and say, is there a conflict of interest? Please guide me and advise me. And I know, Chris, you've been updated on this and you can back me up if need be. But the ruling was that there is not a conflict of interest. I could still choose to recuse myself, but I personally believe I've been sworn to this position and that once you get in a gray area and you don't take a position, then you create, that cascades into other unintended consequences. So I believe because it's been ruled that I don't have a conflict of interest, that I do have a duty to vote on this matter. And I will, just for clarification, so that for complete transparency, so everybody knows, my full-time employment is with the Belle Isle Conservancy. I report to a board of directors. A member of that board of directors is John Cotton. John is not the chair of the board, as was represented earlier. He's a member of the board, and you all need to know what a mission-minded human being he is. He does not fund salary. He funded Sir Ringo Woodward of Belle Isle, the brand new octopus that is now our most beloved and most sophisticated exhibit at the Belle Isle Aquarium, which continues to be free to everybody, including all Detroiters. And it's this beautiful institution that exists for STEM education and the like. That's what John Cotton is continuing. That's the mission-minded human being that we get to work with and that I get to work with, not my salary. So for that reason, I do plan to vote today. And I think it's important that the community knows. And that's why I asked you the question. I want the community to see who and what you are, what we see when we talk to you or that, which is not often, I will say that, but that's just been my experience. So I hope I've addressed that, and I do plan to fulfill my duty this evening. And I want to say too, I was doing some research on the Cabbage Patch because it's such an important part of our DNA. And it got its name by Mrs. Henry Joy because she felt that the homes looked like those that were, and you'll love this because you love literature. The book was Mrs. Wiggs and the Cabbage Patch by Alice Caldwell Hegan Rice. And that's how the Cabbage Patch got its name. And there were also different things I found that there was a statement made by, I believe it was a local real estate agent, that never has the future of this wonderful little corner of Grosse Pointe Park looked so bright. And another in Metro Mode, it said the city grows more diverse every year, high walkability, and this is progress. And I have to agree, this is not only good progress, but great progress. And what I've also heard tonight is good trouble. Because again, you've helped improve this process and you've helped us learn what we need to do better. And I want to make that very clear this meeting. I sincerely apologize to you all. I share all the concerns of my colleagues. It should not have happened the way it did. And I consider Grosse Pointe Park this wonderful fixer-upper that we've all bought. It's got amazing bones. It has things that need to be fixed. And we do them when we can. You can't do the boiler, the windows, the roof, and everything all at one time. But you seize the moment. So when the heat goes out, you forget the windows for a while and you fix the boiler. Well, today's boiler is this process, and we have to fix it, and we will. And I want you all to see that in the form of action. I've asked Mayor Pro Tem Caulfield to be involved. He would have been here tonight, but he's on a plane. He was at our Community Engagement Committee meeting. He chairs our Ordinance Review Committee. He will be looking at all these ordinances and prioritizing. The administration knows it's on notice to approve the administrative policies. So you will see that action because again, it can't be just words. So I do plan to vote in favor of this because I do think it is great progress. It's never a straight line. But the reasons for that are because our professionals have told us that this is a recommended action and that's important. It's quality. It's part of a transformation. You said it yourself, Mr. Stein. Steins, the area is flourishing. It does have a mission focus to it. And we all know we do need to be better and we will be better. So with that, I will be voting next and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Okay, all right, I would like to open it up for further discussion, but before I do that, I would like to correct something I did say earlier that the public comment portion of this meeting is over. That was imprecise. I meant that the public comment on this particular motion is closed. We do have, of course, public comment on non-agenda business, which is our second to last agenda item. So I just wanted record to state that. Now, in order to make sure we have full discussion, we've all gone in turn. Now I'd like to open it up. If anyone wants to comment on someone else's comments, if they've thought of additional questions or they have follow-ups to the statements made by Mr. Stein or Mr. Jackson, I'll just open it up. So
I just want to make sure I understand the procedure. So if we vote to recommend that the council approve the zoning change, then it'll go to city council for a yes, no vote. Is that right?
That's correct.
And if we vote not to recommend to send it to city council, obviously it's not going to go any further than.
The vote's not to not send to city council. The vote would be to deny the zoning request. And that recommendation of denial then goes to council.
Okay.
Which could still get approved by
They
council.
could still approve it.
I see.
And the motion on the table is to recommend council approval.
Right.
Until withdrawn or modified or voted upon after that.
So either way, it'll go to council in order for them to make a final determination. Okay. Thank you.
So tonight, our vote, if it was to, we voted yes for rezoning parking, that does not rezone parking. This still needs to go to council and they still have the actual vote on it. This is just a recommendation.
Right, because the rezoning is an ordinance and then they only the legislative body can do it. Their legislative process to make it a final decision.
And so when they review it, for lack of a better way to put it, do they review it like de novo? Or, I mean, do they have to listen to us either way?
Yes, because they don't have to, they can overturn whatever the decision is.
Irrespective of what we say.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
They do not have to hold another public hearing unless they choose to, or unless their process requires it. But under the Planning Act, they do not have to.
Okay, thank you.
And what I'm hearing also is that the procedural issues that we have, the questions about transparency and the way the process has been handled will be dealt with through different channels. Is that right?
I believe that's what the mayor has pledged. You have my commitment.
all right, any other commentary on the motion? Okay, I think then what I'd like to do is call for a vote. I think we should do a roll call. And so this is the motion to recommend approving the rezoning request to council. So a yes vote will send it to council with the recommendation to approve.
sit down?
Lot this.
I'm sorry.
I was just asking if they could sit down so we could see.
All right, so now the matter is up for a vote. I think we'll go, can you go ahead and?
Yeah, we're gonna read the same order I did the roll call, so we'll start with Coletta.
I have to vote no.
Hodges.
Yes.
Evans.
No.
Saros.
Yes.
Tacky.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. So that will close consideration of the rezoning request. The next item on the agenda is, as I mentioned before, public comment on non-agenda items. Okay, so yes, I've been advised it really could be anything because we have labeled it public comment with no qualifier. So I would invite any members remaining in the audience or residents remaining in the audience to come up and again, we'd like to limit the comments to 3 minutes. Does anyone like to speak at this point? Okay, we'll go again to the first row is first. So, sir.
Brad Drever representing my family here, 1400 Block Nottingham. Mayor Hodges, I think you said it really well when you said, hey, when heat goes out, you gotta address the boiler and not the windows. And right now, I think what everybody said here is the process was disgusting. And so as a result of that, I think that that's the heat. That's the problem. We weren't capable of making good decisions here tonight because our ordinances aren't in place. We went ahead and we pushed it along. You guys voted to recommend it. So I know that we're trying to talk about non-agenda items a little bit, but and that's what this is. The non-agenda item here is that our ordinances are not set up in a way, as Warren pointed out, to allow bodies like this to make good decisions that support the people, support our community. That's the boiler that needs to be fixed. And I really hope the city council puts the brakes on this until we can fix our ordinances so we can make sure that things are done the way that they need to be done in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe?
So I have to say, I'm really disappointed in the quality of the discussion up here. It's really not created a record that could look at the master plan and the parking study. Several of us referring to it in our opening comments. I was hoping to hear more robust discussion about the different methods that were suggested by the planning study that should be, the parking study that should be done before more parking. So this is a really, really paltry. Thank you.
Thank you. In the back? I think you're the next. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, hi, I'm still Steve Boldern at 1354 Beaconsfield. I should probably address these comments to council, but I work during council meetings. You're gonna get it tonight. Like it or not, this city has a bad reputation for not being transparent. I'm talking about warehousing the properties on Jefferson to make way for the art center. Basically giving those properties away. Talking about taking tax dollars that would have gone to important entities, capturing them for TIPA, building the DPW facility with those TIPA dollars. I'm talking about the buried Phil Pitters deal. And I'm talking about what's happening right now. Now the city's going to come to us with their handout for a millage. I do not trust the current administration with those dollars. I do not believe the city operates honestly and transparently. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you, sir. Trying to be respectful. Council spoke about 15 minutes in the introduction. I didn't realize I'd be limited to 3 minutes. I just want to say a few things. Someone talked to you about the ownership here, talked to you about the highest and best use of the property. You're interfering with the highest and best use of my clients. There's no buffer, which is what we give in every industrial project we have everywhere. There's a buffer between residential and commercial or industrial. This is going to get moved out of here and go to the city council and approved. It's a public-private partnership in which you're really acquiring property. This is Poletown and on steroids. And in Detroit, where they give all these tax benefits, people just pay a premium on properties. I don't know if you're doing that here, if you're giving a tip for what you're doing, DDA here. But the reality of the situation is, once it leaves here, the chance of having the city council think this out isn't gonna happen. And your chance of compromise isn't gonna happen. And if you don't have this down pat, because you're changing the master plan, you're leaving someone who had a contemplation of being 2 doors from the downtown where they wanted to be on a parking lot with smelly oysters, you're missing it. Because I'm not convinced that this isn't like Old Town in the next generation. You have this public-private partnership without any certainty of what it's gonna be, and you don't know where your parking's gonna be. What you really needed here was to sit down and look through the whole thing, and realize who was breaking and why, to get this done. I urge you to reconsider this and stay this in such a way that the table this till it's all done. Because when it goes to the city council, so just go through and have fun, and make the lawyer very successful, getting paid hourly. I don't want to be laughed at. I'm going to ask you to come up doing these things with some common sense answers.
I just have a quick question for Jim Soares Jr. So you mentioned rather ominously at the end that this needs to be approved because the development is coming. I think that was kind of a question that was made by a lot of folks about, lack of transparency. So what is coming? Right? We've already heard about, there's plans for the other 2 parking lots to be demolished, which are roughly 30 spaces. And they're building roughly 30 spaces. So it seems to me, and I appreciated your comment about the precedent, that this is just going to rear its head again, apparently very soon. So what does the planning commission here think about, I guess, in that comment? And I mean, I'm surprised with everything going on. I would think that a moratorium on further demolitions is probably a pretty reasonable thing to consider, given that there's development, more development closely on the heels of this. And we've all admitted here that procedurally, this is a huge failure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Hello, thank you again for everybody that's speaking. I will keep calling just to figure out what's gonna happen to the houses on my block, because I don't think it's necessarily open, and maybe there will be more transparency, or we'll get more, but I'm not really sure. So at this point, that's I'm past that now. I just kind of have to deal with some vacant homes that are on my block and, be as safe as I can with my family. I just wanna let you know, because this is the planning commission, right? I'm a resident of Grosse Pointe Park, and I became a resident of Grosse Pointe Park because of its proximity to Detroit. Because I went to school there, and I worked there, and I continue to work there. And I just want to say, just to state my intentions, that I would love for the city to be the best neighbor ever. If you plan on doing something, plan on having us like that. Let that be our progress. I want what you're saying is progress, and I want what you consider commerce and bringing more people in. But I also really love for you to understand that there are people that bought here because of how close we were to Detroit. There were so many great things happening, and I love that you want development here, but I want everybody to be on board with you having this great transparent process. So I would love for you to just know, from one citizen that has a backyard that's really close to Detroit, please let part of your progress be the best neighbors ever, and have that be part of the flagship of this city. Please. Kelly Rossi, 1100 Waverns.
I just wanted to say something about the rodent problem and to get that addressed going on, because I did call the city about a rodent problem, and the current way of dealing with it is the city doesn't do anything because there was a problem where they put poison out and dogs died. And so just to think about that in your planning process, are you gonna put it on the building owners? Are you gonna put it on the residents, or is this a part as this continues to develop?
Thank you.
I just wanted to address again, from my experiences, that I've spoken a little bit to Warren about my experiences and we spoke about the inadequacies, quite frankly. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Warren, but we spoke about the inadequacies of the process in Grosse Pointe Park, which by my view is 50 years behind the times. And how these things, allowing demolition without a demolition permit, allowing a demolition without even a site plan approval, calling this, all the papers should be on the docket right off the get-go. Don't tell me later some single individual is going to approve the site plan when there's no opportunity anymore for public input. What I would like to suggest in this regard is, in my experience, the various times where I've worked, there's times when the development pressure gets ahead of the planning process. And during those times, our communities have put a moratorium, sometimes for 6-9 months, a year even, on commercial development or sometimes on subdivisions or whatever the affected part of the problem is. And they put a moratorium until such time that they could get their pins in a row so that this situation, which is bound to happen again because the Cottons are going to continue to develop property, so it's going to go one after another. They're ready. They own the property. They have the money. So it's going to be continuing, and the same sort of problems that we have expressed here are going to continue time and time again. You need to put a moratorium on development till you get your pins in a row so you can get this process right, because right now it is not.
Thank you. All right, would anyone else like to speak? All right, seeing no one, I will move to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second? Second. All right, so we'll just go ahead, I guess, with the roll call vote. And anyone who is would like to adjourn the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, I hereby adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Saros?
Yes, ma'am.
So I live over, you guys call my callers a lot, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I've had a call in 2 times.